President Trump hasn't spent much time in front of cameras this holiday weekend, but he has been quite active on Twitter. The president released a flurry of tweets denying claims that he called American troops who died in World War I suckers and losers. The Atlantic magazine first reported the comments, and several other outlets have since confirmed part or all of the report. On Sunday, the president accused Democrats of launching a disinformation campaign. Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden quickly seized on the report. He condemned the president in an unusually forceful speech on Friday. To talk about this tumultuous week in politics, I'm joined by Zeke Miller. He's a CBSN political contributor and White House reporter for the Associated Press. Zeke joins us now from Washington, D.C. Hey, Zeke. So the president has disparaged veterans before, including the late Senator John McCain and Gold Star father Khizr Khan. That all happened before he was elected president the first time. So what's new or special about these particular reports? And do you expect that it's going to have any more impact on his campaign than it did back in 2016?
You know, it's probably not going to change the minds of any voter. At the end of the day, our politics, our nation is already so polarized, and we're seeing that in so many different aspects of daily life. That said, that what it could change is intensity, and that's sort of where elections are won and lost, particularly the sort of election that President Trump especially is trying to run, which is all about the intensity and the enthusiasm of his base of supporters. This could depress some of that. And conversely also drive up some of the enthusiasm of Joe Biden's supporters. That is where the elections are lost. It's not necessarily the task for Donald Trump or Joe Biden between now and Election Day in these last 8 weeks or so isn't about convincing people what to like them more than the other guy. It's about just simply getting them to get up and vote and actually get them out to the polls. And every little story like this, and this is not a little story, this is a big story. This could move the needle on that. And all it takes are as we saw back in 2016, a few thousand votes this way or the other way, and the Electoral College can swing a very different direction.
Do you think it makes a difference, Zeke, that in the examples back in 2016, he had beef with John McCain. Khizr Khan had supported Hillary Clinton and was speaking at the DNC. In this case, it is generally applied, if true, to veterans who served this country and lost their lives. Is there something about that potentially makes a difference?
It certainly could be here. These weren't individuals who were in the political arena. They fought and died a century ago in World War I in one instance that's been confirmed by the Associated Press and other outlets now, talking about American war dead at a cemetery in France. They were not in the political arena. They were there fighting on behalf of their country a century ago, and that is the sort of thing that we could potentially see a shift in support of military voters this cycle. By and large, historically, they've tended to vote sort of in the Republican direction. We saw a little bit of a mixed bag. They certainly favored President Trump in 2016. That it's a bit of a mixed bag, but we can see how that shapes out back in 2020. This could move the needle a little bit.
Well, and I spoke with the spouse of an active duty Air Force member on Saturday who expressed anger and sadness at the president's alleged comments. Zeke, put this in context for us. How important is support among military members and their families to President Trump's reelection campaign?
By and large, military voters as a bloc are not massive. The share of Americans who serve in the military or have served, or families who have served, it's just a couple of percentage points. But if you look at some of the states where they are, where there are large military bases, North Carolina, Florida, those are big, important states for any president looking to win their reelection. It could move the needle there just a little bit, and that's just sort of looking at the small, narrow view of electoral politics and sort of the broader one. And sort of this is a president who has a history of making controversial statements and has had a lot of supporters in the past. And back in 2016, sort of held their nose and voted for him maybe because they either didn't like Hillary Clinton or they wanted some sort of massive change in the country. This time around, if the president's trying to ask voters to sort of hold their nose again and vote for him, he's the president now. There's not, he's not necessarily the same change agent that he was before. So the dynamics for him this cycle, when it comes to sort of the public's tolerance for these sorts of statements, may be a little different. And that's one of the things that we'll be looking for very closely between now and Election Day.
Well, the day after the Atlantic story broke, the Trump administration ordered a ban on certain types of racial sensitivity training for federal employees. What's behind this? Is it the president trying to change the subject, or is this something that the administration's been planning for a while?
This isn't something that has been in the works for a while. This is sort of my reporting is sort of told me that it's sort of a direct response to what the president was consuming on Fox News and the conservative media more broadly. This notion that in this summer of cultural reckoning over racial injustice, there's been this sort of counter-reactionary movement in some conservative circles to trainings about white privilege or inherent racism, systemic racism in the United States. And that's something the president has sort of spoken very publicly against and rejected back into his July 4th speech over at Mount Rushmore. The president has openly talked about there being a culture war in this country. And this is sort of just another effort on the part of the president to sort of wage that cultural battle in sort of an area of something that he can control, which is the federal government. These sorts of trainings are commonplace at Fortune 500 companies, down to schools. This won't have an impact there, but this is sort of the one narrow area of society that the president has some more direct control over, the federal workforce. He's trying to roll this training back.
President Trump's former personal lawyer, Michael Cohen, is the latest of former associates of the president to have a new book coming out. What are some of Cohen's claims, and how is the White House responding?
Well, the White House response is sort of Michael Cohen is the definition of a terrible fact witness. He is somebody who's admitted to lying before federal court when he pleaded guilty. He's somebody who has an axe to grind with the president. We've seen that time and time again. He's appeared in Democratic ads against the president. That said, he was deeply and intimately involved in almost everything the president did for the years before and including his 2016 presidential campaign. He saw it all. He was involved in it all when it came to the Stormy Daniels payout. So he's just providing additional sort of color and sort of filling in the gaps. In some cases, the things that we already knew happened, and providing his own personal accounts of the insider account of how they came about. And then also sort of saying that, all the things that maybe some Americans assumed true of the president and of his business practices are in his account. That's what he saw as well. That's, but again, the president's, while the White House, the president's campaign will basically say, you can't take anything Michael Cohen says at face value. He's an admitted liar and, has an axe to grind. So those two things can both be true. And that's sort of the challenge is going to be sort of how credible is Michael Cohen. He's not very credible, but he was also there and doesn't have a whole lot of incentive to sort of try to go against the president here.
All right, switching topics entirely, a federal judge Sunday ordered the U.S. Census Bureau to not cease operations early. The 2020 census was initially set to wrap up by the end of this month, but a temporary restraining order suspends those plans until a court hearing in 2 weeks' time. Does the White House plan to fight that order?
I think it's certainly possible we'll see that. I was told earlier today that the White House officials were sort of studying their options. The Department of Justice was trying to figure out the next course of action. And this is all very important because the president is, after the census tried to sort of slow itself down because of in response to the pandemic for months, it wasn't necessarily safe to knock on people's doors. Now the president has sort of tried to accelerate the timetable as he's tried to ensure that no matter the outcome of the election, he will essentially control how apportionment is handled, how congressional seats in the House are reallocated between states. And the president has tried, through executive orders and other actions, to try to take a very narrow view of who's considered to be a resident for the purposes of apportionment, and try to only apply that to citizens and natural and green card holders, and not people in this country illegally. That is also going to fight its way through the courts. It's sort of a separate process, but they're all sort of entangled together when it comes to the census question.
All right, last question for you, Zeke. The president has all but been promising a coronavirus vaccine before the election. What happens if it isn't delivered by then?
That's it's an interesting question, because the president here has essentially raised expectations so much, and one of the things that you sort of learn, and certainly the president has talked about a lot, is if you underpromise and you overdeliver, that's a good way of being sort of do good customer service. And this is the president doing the opposite. He's overpromising and running the risk of being not necessarily being able to deliver on election day. The one thing that's working in his favor, though, all the way through that is so much. Election day this year is not election day. It's going to be election month, or election really 2 months. As we saw the first ballots being mailed out in North Carolina on Friday. So the president may get just by providing that hope, that may could sway some votes in key states. That if it's not out on November 1st or October 31st or by November 3rd, the president can maybe potentially get a pass because he's banked enough votes on the promise, on the hope that he's been selling, even if he can't actually deliver on it.
All right, Zeke Miller, thank you.
Thank you.